Dan and I are making an assumption here of these areas where there's tons of small lots that are moving. And if you get the one big one, a lot of times that can be like a game-changing deal that you quadruple your money on if you do it right.
Hey guys, Dan Habercost and Mason McDonald coming at you with a solo episode today to finish off the year talking through 2024, what went right, what went wrong, and what we're doing next year given those occurrences. So Mason, how's it going?
I think it's going well. It's always an exciting time where, for whatever reason, the new year creates a lot of optimism with goal setting and all the kind of fun business stuff that I actually really enjoy. And I think at a more macro level, there's a lot of optimism in the business that we're in going into 2025 because 2024, it's funny where it felt like such a hard year. And I go and look at the numbers and it's like, oh, I did better than 2023 somehow, even though it didn't feel like it at all. So it's always nice to kind of look back, from 30,000 feet and see. So it'll be a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk through all aspects of our business and really an emphasis on how to take lessons learned, both good and bad, and apply them going forward. So you want to kick it off, Mason, with your land business and some of what went right?
Yeah. So in 2024, there was a little bit different of a strategy that we started really using compared to a lot of the business that we had done in 2023. I think learning more about land business and understanding different market conditions and understanding different market cycles gave us the ability to pivot in a way that wasn't based on anything other than, Dan, copying your strategy. I think that in 2024, we really did a lot more volume than we had done in previous years, both on top line revenue as well as number of transactions that occurred. But our average deal size was a lot smaller. So we started targeting some additional markets in the Southwest where the price point was in that kind of like $20,000 to $35,000, $40,000 per lot amount as versus focusing entirely on big, giant six-figure deals. And I think that was a strategy that really helped pay the bills in 2024. Going for those quicker transaction, quick turnaround, lower profit, but base hit deals, I think has been a strategy that we were pretty intentional about doing in 2024 and that we executed on pretty well because, and we'll spend plenty of time talking about what went wrong in 2024. But I do think that affordable, lower price point market and land acquisition and sale model was really, really effective in 2024. What about you, Dan, for 2024? What was something that went right?
Yeah, so I've been doing that sort of model for years and years, and that continued this year. I mean, I know a lot of people talked about the market slowing down, and that just was not the case in most of the bread and butter Southeast markets, and it's still not the case right now. In those markets where house prices are cheap, where lots of people are moving, where there's finished lots everywhere, hasn't slowed down, and in fact, some of the markets went up dramatically. So that continued to go very well. I will say, well, I'll wait until we get to what went wrong. But yeah, the land business has continued to be productive and have not had to sit on much of anything. In fact, I've gotten most of the old crappy lots off my books here in the last few months. And I'd say this was true for our ventures funding deals where the ones that we stuck to, bread and butter, growing areas, moved very quickly and went very well also.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one additional point I want to add to what went well is where some of the best margins on deals that we had this year, both within our funding business and at least within my own individual land business, has been the affordable, rural, buildable land. Not recreational by any means. I mean, on the outskirts of growing cities, larger acreage, where people are going to put probably, an affordable stick built or maybe even like a Clayton Homes 3-bed, 2-bath manufactured home. I think the land deals that I've done in markets similar to that here in Colorado, as well as some of the ones we did in Tennessee and Oklahoma, have worked out really well and were some of my quickest turnaround deals, where I think looking back at 2022, when I first got started, a majority of my business at the very beginning was more recreational type land, or where people just wanted to buy land in a mountain town in Colorado. And those deals were phenomenal to get me started in this business. But that market for sure over the past couple of years it's not dried up by any means. I think a lot of people are still having success, but for me, that's some of the inventory that took the longest to turn over, and that some inventory that we still have. I mean, we have a handful of lots that are still sitting on the market almost 600 days later in certain markets. That'll be great whenever we get the capital back on that. But I think, to kind of summarize within the land business on at least the type of markets and the type of land deals that went really well for me: infill lots in affordable areas, especially at the beginning of 2024, and rural lots right outside of growing cities have done really, really well.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, something that we're doing corresponding to this whole conversation is going to like outside of Wilmington and finding, okay, there's lots of lots for sale that are maybe a half acre to an acre, acre and a half, and then finding the 5+ acre pieces or whatever the norm is. If there's a ton of quarter acre lots available, finding the few acre pieces. And that has worked very, very well for us and is a big focus, because I think a lot about just ability to sell, liquidity of the lot. And when we get those oversized ones, when there's no oversized ones available and tons of small ones available and selling, they tend to just fly off the shelf. So whatever, the norm is, if there's 5 acre lots everywhere and you can get the 1 10-acre lot, that sort of thing works very, very well. And we're heavily focusing on those.
And I think an interesting point about that is I don't think that works as well in the reverse, where if it's 5 acre lots selling everywhere, and there's only 1 or 2 of these 1 or 2 acre lots, usually there's a reason that seller is calling you back.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a non-conforming lot, or sometimes it's just there's no desire in it. And I think one of the points that I want to draw out of that, and it's a lesson that is continuously learned and reinforced over and over for what Dan and I do every day, which is the local opinion of value is so crucial within this business, because I think that with these deals that people submit to us, for instance, for funding, and it's like there's no comps on the market for it because it's this unique property, that can be fantastic. And some of the best deals we've ever done have been that way. And some of the worst deals we've done have been that way. And which is why, if you are interested in getting involved in this business or interested in working with us in some capacity, you need to have that local knowledge, because Dan and I are making an assumption here of these areas where there's tons of small lots that are moving. And if you get the one big one, a lot of times that can be like a game-changing deal that you quadruple your money on if you do it right. But it can also not work out in the same capacity. But anything you want to add on that, Dan? I feel like that's something you and I preach all the time, where comps trump everything except a local expert opinion of value.
Yeah, because there's just so many nuances of different markets you don't know about. And so one of the things I had on the list here is talking about funding, and funding went very well for us. But I think we're both on the same page where we want to narrow the scope a little bit and focus more on areas we know, or have a really, really good realtor and really clear demand and comps, because that's one of the easiest ways to get yourself in trouble, is just going to too many areas, too much creep in your scope of where you're investing, because there's just so much nuance between markets. I don't know what do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, one of the challenges associated with that is you can only know so many markets so well. And I think that in the age of technology, and with what a lot of the business models that I see are doing right now, is this kind of nationwide approach, which there's a lot of opportunity in that. But unfortunately, I mean, that Denison, Texas deal we funded, which we still own, we funded it like almost a year ago. A year ago today, in December of 2024, as we're recording this. And it looked on paper like a good deal. The
Mm-hmm.
comps checked out, decently high demand area. But what happened, and we weren't aware of during the time, was that measures passed that changed what the development costs would be through various city fees and tap fees and stuff like that, that turned the soft cost of development from nearly zero to like 13 or 14,000, and almost every builder exited the market. So eventually we're going to, dispo that deal. But I think that the learning lesson really is, you're going to miss opportunities in this business,
Yeah.
and you can't work everywhere. And I think it's funny to see my own business going from tons of states and tons of markets to a shrinking back into just a few, and really quadrupling down on the volume and potentially being able to pay a higher price, which is some of the stuff that we're excited about going into 2025, which we'll talk about at the end of the episode. But I do agree with you, Dan, that, having that market expertise is something that it takes a long time to build. And now that we've built it in a handful of markets, I'm not overly eager to jump into new ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree strongly. I think I've done a little bit of the same, where I started very narrow. I did like my first 40 deals in one county, then expanded because that county shut down water taps, or not county, the specific area in that county I was doing business in did. So there is risk of doing too much concentrated business. And then I probably expanded a little too much, so shrinking back down a bit too. But beyond that, couple other things I wanted to say just within the land business. Assignments. First, I did 8, maybe 10 of those this year, and that was the first time in years. And so I've definitely enjoyed that. It brings down the cost of goods sold quite a bit, speeds up the whole process. So I'm going to continue incorporating some assignments, really tripling down on the cold calling. That has been an excellent lead measure to get leads into our funnel, and very, very cheap relative to mail. And then let's see, within the land business, I'd say finally I've started to figure out hiring and how to have a good team, because got some of the best acquisition guys I've ever had. So a lot of things have gone right this year. It's been a productive year overall for sure within the land business.
Yeah, I think the last thing related to the land business that I want to add on or double down on is the in-house cold calling has been extremely beneficial for us in Q4 of 2024. I fired my one full-time acquisition manager and spent a couple months doing the business myself, which is always beneficial to be able to jump back in, but also realize where some of the greatest gaps or inefficiencies in the model was. And so I think on a marketing approach, implementing in-house cold calling with a full-time acquisition and sales manager has been really, really beneficial, and something that we look forward to doing a lot more of in 2025. Dan, do you have anything else, any other additional wins that you want to talk about from 2024? Because you've been doing new construction all year long. How's that gone?
Yeah, so that's good. I for anyone that doesn't know, that's how I learned about land, was through new construction starting in 2018. Did simple new builds for years. The builder I had been using kind of fell apart into 2023. Sold off not great spec houses in 2023, and then restarted with a new contractor. And I've learned through bad experiences that with new people, you do one deal and you make sure it goes well before you do multiple. So with the new contractor, did one duplex build. It's a big, nice duplex. That went great. Had about $100K in equity in it day one. It rented higher than I expected, and now I have a nice producing asset. So I kept that building, bought a couple fourplexes. So build and hold and buy and hold went well this year, and building some spec homes going into next year with that same contractor. So excited for that, because that's just another means of making money with land. And I like the model because we're building entry level, the cheapest new construction in the market. And so that tends to move. And even if it doesn't, then they're decent rental homes. So that went well this year, and looking forward to doing more next year.
Yeah, it's such an important foundation to understand land and the ability to understand land and how it can make you very successful in new construction or your land business, because it's the true foundation of all of it. But in terms of additional good stuff, to keep the first part of the podcast on the positive before we'll spend probably plenty of time on the negative, I think one thing that Dan and I are both extremely happy about is this podcast of it took a while before we actually looked at the data, but going into the end of the year, we've got a growing presence on YouTube. We'll have well over 30,000 views in 2024 on YouTube compared to 3,500 in 2023. We've grown 500 to 600% across listeners on Spotify. We've had some fantastic guests of whom we've listened to their podcasts for years and heard them on interviews, and now they're coming on our show, which is really great. And we really want to continue improving with this show. I think that Dan and I were enthusiastic and very opportunistic whenever it came to creating this, and we are still recording from our webcams in our offices. And I think one fun thing was when we went to the Pineda studio was to actually get to record in a studio. And I know you recorded in an in-person studio in San Diego, Dan. And I think there is opportunities for the aesthetic of the podcast to improve and everything like that. But I think that 2024, we really had a full year of podcast episodes. This will be the 52nd episode of the year and probably the 80th episode that we've released. So I think this was one of my favorite parts of business that we do in 2024.
Yeah, that's a good point, because getting to interview people like Pineda or Matt Faircloth, Kevin Bob, people that I've listened to for 6-7 years was pretty interesting, and also insightful. A lot of free consulting for both of us.
Totally agree. And I can't wait to see where it goes next year. And for those of you guys that are actually listening right now, please comment and share this show with people that you think will find it valuable. But reach out to us. We're very accessible. We're not famous by any means, obviously. We'd love to hear what you think. We would love to get insights into what you guys would enjoy hearing going into 2025 and beyond. The podcast is something that Dan and I have no intentions of ever stopping. We just want to continue to get better and better. And I look forward to going back and listening to this 2024 recap 2025 outlook episode in 10 years. It's fun to have kind of an online diary and interview of insights into our business and where we're at and what we've got going on. So I think that's been really fun. And we did mention it a bit, but the launch and creation of Ground Up Fund, our first experience as actual fund managers, has been decently positive, I would say. We've done some really great deals through the fund and through our funding business. And I think that going into 2025, it'll be very positive. But it's also been very different than I think either of us expected. We've released a podcast probably at the beginning of the year talking about what we were doing. And it's not gone as easy as I think either of us expected it to be. It is refreshing sometimes talking on these podcasts with people that we've been interviewing, of everyone saying it's the hardest time to raise money that it has been in years and years. But I do think that the experience in 2024 that we've had in the fundraising and deal funding space has been invaluable.
Yeah. I would put this under the challenges for this year, because it's been much more challenging to raise money than either of us expected. We did a blind pool fund, of course, which is not helping us, but that's the way we want to do it. So we're going to figure it out. But even just for individual deals, it has gotten harder to raise money than it was a couple years ago. Now, both of us have a bigger network. We know more people. We've built trust with a number of people, but our businesses are growing. So there's still challenge there. And I would say that raising money has continued to be the largest bottleneck in my business. I think that's true for yours too. And it's such a dichotomy where there's such opportunity in land because it's inefficient, it's not well understood. And then because of that, it's very hard to raise money, because if a lot of people understood it, then it wouldn't be as easy. It'd be more competitive. And so that's just the challenge of land, right? It's easier to get deals and buy things at a discount. That's much harder to raise money. And so a podcast, I think, is a big way of educating our network and our sphere of influence so that people are more comfortable investing with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's a good pivot point of the challenges of 2024, or what went wrong in 2024. And I think switching to the actual operations of the land business of what went wrong. I think and we can talk about probably one of the bigger pain points is the employee management side, where for me, for my first hire within the business, I had a similar approach to what I had in corporate America, which is I want to find the absolute best talent with the most experience and pay them as much as I possibly can, and then give them a ton of freedom to feel empowered to go make deals and go create deals. And that's what I did. And that was a 2023 hire. But I do think that it would have been much more, or was that a 2024 hire? Now I don't remember.
You hired him in 2023.
2023. Look at the time. So it was a 2023 hire, and I think having hired someone with more experience than me in corporate America always seemed to work out well. All of my employees were many times double my age, so I was very accustomed to having someone older than me work for me. And I'm not talking about any age-based discrimination or anything like that of what age group to hire or anything. But I do think when you hire someone that has too much experience, they have too many bad habits and too many assumptions on how things can run. And I think that has hindered us for a lot of deals and a lot of inventory where the deal cycle timeline is just really not within the scope of practice, where if you bring in someone from multifamily that's used to 5 to 7 year exits on projects and not realizing returns for 5 to 7 years, that's very different than the land business, where we really try to go full cycle in 60 to 180 days on kind of the max end. And I think that managing someone that wasn't as hungry, wasn't as motivated, didn't need the kind of sales income that you get in a more commission-based role was definitely a hindrance and a challenge. And there was a huge relief whenever I terminated that employee.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate. I mean, I hired my first employee 3.5 years ago for the land business, and some wins and some losses. But coming out of 2023, I fired someone right at the end of the year last year. That person ended up being a huge pain into this year. Hired another person early this year that quickly didn't work out, and finally figured out the unfortunate reality that people need encouragement, management. And so daily meetings has been one of the biggest things that's made a difference. So I have 2 acquisition guys. One's been with me for 14 months. One's been with me now for 9 months, March. And got the best team I ever had, but that was only once I finally learned the lesson of you're not going to find, it's very challenging to find acquisition people that are comfortable being employees in the long term who are as independent as Mason or I, or as a lot of the entrepreneurs listening to this, where I hired a number of people that were that independent, but soon enough, they wanted to start their own business. And so I finally found people who are comfortable being under my business's umbrella, but it requires a lot of management, a lot of encouragement, recognition, daily meetings, and this is what I was missing before. And I'll say one more thing. Probably the biggest thing that has helped is at the beginning of their employment, and then periodically we look at their personal goals financially, and I show very clearly how their day-to-day lead measures and actions and KPI sheets all feed back into not just the company's goals, but their personal goals. And that has made a huge difference in really aligning incentives and getting them on board every day.
And Dan, I think that the alignment of incentives is one of the most challenging things within management, especially within the small business, because it's very different managing in a corporate environment where, yeah, you're overseeing potentially millions or hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, but it's not your money. And so there's less of a stake there. So there is this real difficult balance of you to pull yourself out of the business emotionally and, not be upset that an employee is wasting or not stealing, but not putting to good use the capital that you are investing in all of these deals and in their salary. And I think whenever you can have that level of trust with people, because I think the unique thing about the three full-time salespeople that we have within both of our businesses is they've all been introduced to us through someone we know or someone we trust or already had an established relationship with previously, but didn't necessarily have the full ability to currently own and operate their own businesses. And I think that right there has been huge because of, with who my current sales manager is, who referred to me from a very, very trusted friend, and one of Dan's people who's a fraternity, a former, or I guess current fraternity, it's forever, right, Sigma Chi, but a fraternity brother of mine that I didn't know in a work context, but I knew him as a person, and it's like, yeah, I don't know what experience he has, but he's a good dude. And I think that right there has been really beneficial because within this world, it's such a niche world. The skills are applicable kind of across the board. I don't necessarily love a person with a ton of real estate experience because of the bad habits, but I do think that, in terms of trying to provide useful information to you guys with hiring is if you tell your network who you're looking for, and can get someone you trusts, and you can bring them into your organization, that alignment of incentives challenge that you might run into with someone that doesn't really have a stake in your business other than they're just a person, can be really, really beneficial to get them to believe in the mission, believe in the vision, believe in you as an owner and operator, but also recognize that they can make a ton of money if they do their job well, and you as a manager have to set that up through some of the stuff that Dan was talking about of we do daily meetings, we do weekly meetings, we do a lot more training, and we take feedback very seriously of, hey, what do you think can be better as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else you want to say on employee management before we move on there?
I don't think so. I think that, I think we kind of nailed the point home, and I think we've got good teams going into the new year. And as the team continues to function at a high level, I think we're both looking to grow in 2025 with more employees coming to work for us in different capacities. So if you're interested, reach out. We might have openings depending on when you listen to this. But what else went wrong within the land business? And these are some mistakes that came from 2024 as well as 2023 that still paying the piper for. Where it's doing deals in markets where it is the unique product. I don't want to be the unique product from a price point. And I don't mean to contradict anything that we said on the other side of the episode where, hey, it might be the largest lot where a ton of small lots are and there's a ton of demand for that. I'm not doing business in markets with low amounts of transaction. There's higher demand, but an extremely high barrier to entry. And the two thorns in my sides that have been thorns in my side for over a year was this multifamily piece of land in Rifle, Colorado, where it's too small for the big institutional developers and too big for the mom and pop builders. And then a luxury piece of land in Franktown, Colorado, where there is just such a limited buyer pool that it's just, I have to wait for a long period of time. And for those deals that have that high of a price point, for me in the future, there has to be a value add component. I'm not looking to do multi 6-figure flips anymore. I had some luck with a handful of multi 6-figure flips in 2023 and 2024. But these particular ones, the markets were just not set up for the type of business model that I operate because the hold period is just simply too long.
Yeah. And it's easier for me to comment being outside of the scenario, but I think what those two markets have in common, to make sure we clarify from what we said earlier, is there aren't a lot of people moving there, huge job creation. I mean, there's some in Douglas County, but there are affordable neighborhoods nearby, and it's still very much a luxury product. And then, of course, Rifle, Colorado, that's super rural. Whereas I still think if you're near Charleston or, near some of these hubs that are just exploding, then you can do multi six-figure flips if you're really, really certain that you're getting it at the price point you think. I think that's important, right? There can't just be one comp. If there's quite a few comps. And I think this is also where the local expert really comes in, who can speak to the demand, because I know you had a heck of a time with the realtor you initially hired in Franktown. I'm not sure if you've had the same problem with Rifle, but you didn't quite have the competent realtor on your team who could give you that second, hey, yes, this will sell at this price or near this price. Because, the flip you and I did in Tennessee, I think we 280-ish K all in. I think we sold it at 400-ish altogether. I mean, that was great. That realtor knew his stuff. He knew there's demand for it. It did move. So I know you're, of course, experiencing the pain of those deals. And so I think there is a time and place for those multi six-figure flips if you have a high degree of confidence and you're just in a major booming metro. One more thing I'll say to that is, like, what's the income level of the people there? Here in San Diego, buying something for $200 and selling it for $400 is like buying a $20,000 lot and selling it for $40 in Florida. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. But I'll pause there.
No, and you're exactly right. It's the amount of demand that these markets have, where Rifle, Colorado, there's a tremendous amount of demand for affordable housing. I spoke to a developer on the phone yesterday that they're doing an affordable housing project in Rifle, multifamily, and it took them like 3 years to kind of get over the finish line. They need a lot of grant assistance and funding and everything to make it work, because it's very expensive to build there. And there's a good amount of room in this deal for anyone that would be interested in building on it. But there's challenges where if you're not local, you're going to run into a lot more issues than that's someone that has the experience operating in that particular market. And being the only piece of multifamily land on the market, sometimes that's fantastic, but sometimes it's not. And it goes back to the point I was saying of, like, we're in this weird in between where we're too big for the mom and pop and too small for the institutional, as versus if it was a duplex lot or something like that, that'd be a slam dunk deal. But it being, 9 to 31 units, that's a lot more complex and a lot more complicated. And then with Franktown, absolutely, because it's like, who lives in Franktown? It's people that are typically retired, or maybe they have a ton of money and they commute to Castle Rock or Parker or Denver. And so it's a unique property with low demand. The pricing is correct. And the challenge with, not being able to just lower the price continuously to get a deal done is you can lower it to a third of what you expect it to sell at, but there still might not be a buyer for it because the demand just isn't there. And so even though there might be 3 or 4 comps that it's like, oh, it's worth $700,000, that's amazing, but it could have just worked out where it was a family that bought 3 lots right next to each other, which is something that we saw happen. So it's definitely been a good learning opportunity. It's been painful. I mean, it was $600,000 in notes to investors that I paid off, that we thought the deal was going to go a lot different. My investors all made money, which is great for them. And I'm grateful for the learning experience. But yeah, I've definitely learned my lesson and will not be doing more of those deals going into 2025. Dan, what are some land related stuff that maybe particular deals that didn't go correct, or anything else within your business you want to talk about?
Yeah. One of the biggest things that we have re-emphasized, let me backtrack here, because there's several things. I added to our SOP sheet recently, we will not close on a deal or even get past the due diligence period until a realtor checks it in person. Unless it is totally clear and has a Google Earth street fill, simple quarter acre infill, we won't do it. Because I can't tell you how many of these small infill lots that are covered in trees end up having huge topography, or it's wet even though there's no flood zone or wetland, or someone dumped a bunch of junk all over the yard, 10 foot into the trees, or just all kinds of weird things. I will not close unless someone looks at it. And I'm speaking from having deals gone wrong there. And so the overarching point is just being diligent on the due diligence and treating it like a flight list and never missing anything, and checking in person being one of those. A couple other things that have cost us money is weird title issues or issues with we thought it just needed a death certificate and actually needed probate, and probate was super complicated and expensive, and that killed deals and cost us having to pay for title searches. So we've really refined our due diligence process around looking in person, around checking title and ownership, all that up front, and then we execute it on every lot no matter what. I mean, one of the only deals, actually the only deal still on my books from 2023 is a lot in New Mexico that my acquisition manager comped it as if it had power, and it does not have power. It's like $28,000 to extend the power. And so anyways, he just didn't do his due diligence. I should have fired him sooner, so that's my fault. So things went wrong when we skipped on our due diligence, and we will not be doing that anymore.
Yeah, it's the unfortunate reality that it's all the boring, consistent stuff that you might make an assumption, but you can't make any assumptions with anything. And I think a lot of times people will send us deals, or we'll get what we expect to be deals of, hey, look, there's houses all around it. Of course it's going to perk. It's like, well, maybe there's a reason there's houses all around that lot and there hasn't been a house built on that particular lot, is because the soil's garbage. And I mean, that's something that we dealt with this year as well, of like, there was, we in Arizona now, which wouldn't have thought about it because I am, had still been learning about the land business of, we do perk tests on all our lots that are septic, because what ends up happening is you think, okay, it's high and dry, because you hear that all the time from people that are doing business in the Southeast. But what you'll run into in the desert is, oh, it's all rock. Mm-hmm. You'll have to dynamite and then come in with a ton of fill to be able to actually have land that's buildable, even if there's a house right next to it. Because, I mean, think about it. Going to the desert, there's areas where it's sand, there's areas where it's rock. And so I think that's another thing that went wrong that we're really, really, really focused on in 2025 is just perfect execution of due diligence. And I think it gets a lot more simple when you're operating in fewer markets. So you don't have to learn every single market specific due diligence. Something else in 2024 that is, I guess, a unique challenge that we had is with this commercial building that's been kind of the bane of my existence for 2 years now, that we're finally home stretch trying to get the rehab all the way completed now. It looks so much different than 3 months ago, which is really exciting. But one of the difficulties with it is pros and cons of its mixed use commercial zoning. And even though it's going to be entirely residential, with the zoning being mixed use commercial, the opportunities to get lending on it has been much more challenging, because it essentially functions as a duplex, but I can't go get duplex lending options on this property. And what is unfortunate about that, where, yeah, there might be a desire to change the zoning to residential, however, then you are limited by the amount of opportunities for short-term rentals, because it's in a vacation market and all sorts of different implications that come with it. But that was definitely not something that we ran into, at least initially on the buy side, is, okay, what is the end buyer financing going to look like? Which, we are the end buyer, obviously, but since we got the deal on seller finance terms, I think not necessarily realizing the implications of commercial zoning and how that would affect our financing has definitely been a challenge throughout the road, which is why we've done the private money route, and we'll have to refinance, DSCR and do some interesting stuff that's very creative. And I'll be very, very grateful in 20 years that I did this deal. But in 2024, it's definitely been something that has taken up a lot more time. And I think in hindsight, for my first rental property, because of the amount of cash that I've put in, investor capital that's gone in, I could have bought like 4 duplexes in just easy markets rather than what I've been dealing with this particular one.
Yeah, that's a hell of a first rental property, but I think you'll appreciate it sooner than 20 years. Now, you mentioned the debt on the building, the seller financing, and now some private money. I think one thing we can both talk about here as far as things that went wrong and lessons learned. And really one of the main reasons that people in real estate go broke, it's not the debt, but how the debt's structured. And I think short-term ballooning debt is probably the single biggest reason that people go broke in real estate. And I know you can relate to this, Mason, but I am not structuring anything where it comes due, like a hard deadline that it comes due. And I think this is part of what's kept me in the smaller residential buy and holds, because I get 30-year AM fixed rate, no balloon notes. And that is so valuable. And this has been driven in my head more and more, where debt like that is incredibly valuable with inflation eroding it while the asset appreciates slowly and steadily, making me wealthy. Whereas I've seen some of my friends in the multifamily space who are really well off. I mean, much older than me, much more experienced, who have had a rough year because of ballooning debt that was at 4%, 5%, whatever, now substantially higher. And so I think about that a lot and how I structure these land deals too.
Agreed. Where it's tricky because as you're gaining experience, you have to give up a lot. And I feel like something that I've learned my lesson on is I'm not both going to give, only upside to the investor if the terms are not very favorable to me. And I think that the deals that I do now, it's still all upside for the investor, but I'm not beholden to these crazy timelines on deals where, there's people in the funding business where it's like if, it doesn't sell within a few months, you're going to owe a tremendous amount of money. And that right there just doesn't really work for some of these deals that we've done. And like I said, if I paid off, I think close to $800,000 in notes on deals that didn't turn over this year. And I think that I've learned my lesson from it, and it's fine because I own the properties free and clear now. But I don't think that long term it's a sustainable business model to be able to, and I say this of my investors have never lost money. Almost all of my investors are repeat investors. And I do think that you shouldn't lose investors' money, but it's also, hey, there needs to be some risk to the reward. And if there's only upside, then the timeline needs to be able to be extended a lot. And yeah, I think that's definitely a 2024 learning lesson for me of, hey, it is about getting the deal done, but it's not about putting myself at so much risk to get the deal done, because if I have to put myself at that much risk, it's just not worth it. It's too much stress and too much pain. And there's supposed to be a little bit less stress in owning your own business and the financial freedom and all that kind of stuff that you hear on all the podcasts than I've experienced.
Yeah. No, and I think that's important to note, guys. This can be very stressful. I think both of us have had sleepless nights this year. And that is a reality of owning your own business. There's some huge upsides. This is a podcast of good and bad. And there's some huge upsides to owning a business. We took a bunch of fun trips this year. Mason and I had a bunch of friends and his wife went to Japan. That's awesome. Can't do that whenever you want if you are employed. Done a ton of trips all over the place, a lot of snowboarding, surfing, all that sort of thing. But some days, some weeks, some months really, really suck. And I think is an inevitable reality of owning a business.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I went to probably like at least 10 or 12 states this year, 2 different countries, spent a lot of time traveling, both for work and for fun. And I get to set my days up for the most part how I want to. And that's something I'm really focused on actually in 2025 is making sure that my calendar matches up with the desire for productivity that I have, and making my schedule what I actually want. Because sometimes whenever you have unlimited freedom, you end up filling in the gaps to where you have no freedom within business. But I think that's probably enough about talking about 2024, since it's so painful for me to just, trauma dump all my notes I've had to pay off this year. So let's talk about 2025 and what we're doing to not just right the ship necessarily, but to really capitalize on where we're at going into the new market within our own businesses and what we're doing together. So, Dan, you want to kick us off with what you're looking to get started?
Yeah, one of the final things that relates to this that I had on the negatives of 2024, which isn't really a negative, it's just different. Seasonality's back. 2020, 2021, even into 2022, it was still just selling like crazy through all times of the year. Slowed down towards the end of 2022, but the summer was still busy. And we're back to normalcy, which December is always slower. I mean, usually builders are buying for projects next year. I've seen that now 6 years in a row. But a lot of the retail demand slows down. I do a lot of business in Florida, and so summers are very slow because a lot of the population leaves. It's very hot, and that's back. And so one of the biggest things I'm doing is planning for that, both with cash flow management and the way we're buying deals. And so to that end, we're buying like crazy right now. We have a lot of available inventory, a few lots that have been sitting went under contract already this month, so that's great. But we're planning for a busy spring, both in acquisitions and in the new construction I'm doing in Colorado, where, probably March through July is the busiest time of year. It varies a little bit from year to year. And so planning to have the new construction come to fruition early in that period so we can sell it. So planning for seasonality is one of the biggest things I'm doing. I have a lot more to say, but I'll let you comment on that first, Mason.
Yeah, agreed. Copy and paste of we've got a lot of inventory that we're very excited to finally dispo, from years past now that it seems like we've done, some new marketing and pricing strategy where as builder optimism increases going into 2025, I think we're going to be able to alleviate some of the, inventory pains that we have, but also we're still taking on new inventory. We're buying up as much as we possibly can in December and going into, forever now, but, really focused on the winter, especially here in Colorado, to have a very, very busy summer. I think with the new administration coming in and a lot of what people imagine the development incentives and specific just real estate investing related incentives are going to be in these affordable markets that we're really quadrupling down our efforts, within the flipping model for 2025. That's definitely where we're going to really, really hammer the acquisitions side of things for our own investment. So
I've got a comment on something you said there that's important. You've kept doing deals even though you had some go very wrong, and that's so important that you keep making money and don't let one failure or a couple failures in the business taint the whole rest of your business. This was so key when we interviewed Ryan Pineda and his COO in Vegas, where they lost millions of dollars in their flipping company, but kept doing other deals that made them money so they could ride that storm out, get rid of those deals, take those losses, and move on profitably. And we've done the same thing when things have gone wrong in our business, but it's so hard to do in the moment when you have a few deals sitting with a lot of capital in them and it's so uncomfortable. But a good deal is a good deal. And so don't let those thorns in your side stop you from continuing to make money, because that may be the continually making money that gets you through the storm.
absolutely. And that right there, it's the hardest thing I think in business is the balance of the sunk cost fallacy of this is a good idea. I need to keep doing it over and over and over again. And I need to stop. Like, what is going on? Because people hear that of whatever it amounted to, of somewhere in that 700 to 800,000 total range in notes I had to pay off to investors this year, where I'm still at the beginning. I just turned 30. Like, now is the time that I am taking risks, and these are risks. Every deal that Dan and I do, regardless of the confidence that we have in it, there is a risk associated with it. And the ability to continue taking action on what you know works through precedent that you set or your network has set or your community has set is so crucial. But I think also it gives you the opportunity to take a step back and look of like, okay, well, pretend I never recoup that capital. Pretend I never recoup that 800,000, in notes paid off. What do I do? And the way that I'm framing that is, and we've had lots of deals that have gone right that obviously make it so where we're still standing, and still profitable and still doing well. But that's still painful. So it's okay. How do we adapt the model? And a couple episodes ago from this one, we had a Bhaskar Pandey on, and I really love his service-based model. And similar to Dan, I'd done maybe like 7 or 8 assignments this year that worked out pretty well. Like I didn't make a ton of money. I made maybe 20 grand on it. But that 20 grand would have cost me, I think, 170,000 in capital deployed, and it cost me 1,000 in earnest money. And I think that that right there is a model that we really are focusing on building in 2025, specific to the Colorado market of just Colorado land acquisition services for primarily B2B of what do builders need? Something that I've learned throughout this business and, from the framework that Dan learned this business is that builders need land and builders have a very specific criteria for what they're looking for, but most of them don't know how to go out and get it themselves. So they just go direct to market and they're willing to pay at or above market price for whatever their product is because the value that they create through going vertical on the construction pays for the land itself. And by being able to go direct to seller, which is what we've created, is a huge direct to seller funnel, having that local competitive advantage in Colorado and being able to network effectively and learn exactly what builders want and go out and get their land for them, keeping it as an off-market deal is an additional strategy that we're going to really start focusing on within our business. Obviously, we're going to keep doing flips in the markets we really like doing flips in, including the Colorado markets that we're doing flips in. But I do think the service-based model is something that I'm really excited about because it requires far less capital deployed. So our cost of goods sold goes down, which also means that the individual profitability of the deal, if you were closing on both ends, which we might do, has the ability to have reduced margins. And what I mean by that is, say a builder is looking to buy X lot and they will pay $100,000 for their land. For us to do a flip, typically we would pay up to about $60,000 or $65,000 for it for the margins to make sense for us. But now I have the ability to go all the way up to 80, 85, 95,000. Where, obviously the work has to be worth it if it's only like a 5K, profit or a 3K profit. But by having that competitive advantage of not having to worry about who the end buyer is, already having that in place and being able to create a little bit more of a wholesale model is something that I think will hopefully be very, very productive and effective in 2025.
Yep, strongly agreed. And so along with that, just continuing in my business to about 50% of our marketing, keeping that focused on those bread and butter infill lots is something we're going to do. Along with that, hiring another acquisition manager I'm working on so that we can up those lead metrics to get more of those deals. And let's see what else. Along with that, just continuing the daily meetings and fostering and growing a collaborative, fun environment for my guys, I think is really important. They're having fun. The two that I have now, we have fun meetings. They're excited. They're competitive with each other, and continuing that will just feed into, I think, more deals closed and more productive dollars spent on payroll. So that's another big thing for me. And then last thing I'll say on that is really working on getting better and better KPIs as we increase the volume of what we're doing and have better tracking, because there was a long period of time where we weren't calling enough to really get solid metrics. But now, 2,500 to 3,000 calls a week per cold caller, we're actually starting to get some meaningful data. So that helps too.
Yeah. I think that really remembering that it takes a long time to see the effectiveness of a strategy that you implement is crucial in this business. And since so many people are in and out of the business in months, they didn't even have time to see if there were going to be any results yielded from the work that they're doing today. Because a lot of times it takes 6 to 12 months for the work that we're doing today to actually yield anything, whether that's an acquisition or a full cycle deal. So I think that's really important to remember in 2025. And I think kind of in relation to what you're saying and within the business that we're really focusing on is we just hit 3 years in operation and we're really trying to feel like a business now. And we're starting to feel like a business. And I think with that, there's a lot more deliverables that we're working on creating to really enhance what our customer experience is like, specifically on the acquisition side, where the seller or our customer if you think about all the things that we talk about a lot, and what we focus a lot of our marketing on is increasing legitimacy, having a very convenient experience, and, just actually closing the deal. There's a lot of things there that we're going to make the transaction feel a lot more legitimate, on from, having transaction calendars, that we send to people, sending, actual paper copies of what everything is going to look like beyond just, the email of the FAQ sheet, and just a lot more little things, sending thank you cards after the transaction, because we've gotten a lot of deals from people that have referred business to us that we've done a transaction with. And I think that those little simple couple of dollar tasks that we can start implementing is going to be really big, and it's going to really solidify us as feeling like a real business. Like if you go into a title company and buy a house, you get like a gift basket from your realtor and all sorts of different stuff like that. So I think that's one huge focus that we have going into 2025, specifically on the acquisition side, is really improving the customer experience.
Yeah, no, that's all important. And we actually had been doing some of those same things in our business as well. Couple more things. I'm going to keep doing more new construction because that's gone well, and the numbers make sense, and the market's more stable. It's not as volatile, both for the price of commodities and sales price of the homes. And to that end, I'm hoping to build and keep another duplex in 2025. That's the sort of thing I think 5 or 10 years from now I'll be very happy I did. And then, beyond that, just it's fun to make some level of prediction. So we'll see. I'll go on record and say I think it's going to be a strong year in those sorts of markets where there's huge growth in jobs, in population, and where houses are still affordable. Southeast, Texas, all the same places it's been for a long time. I don't think that's going to change anytime in the foreseeable future.
I agree. I think that working in these affordable markets on the outskirts of major cities is where both of our businesses, while in different markets, are really focused, and being able to figure out how to capitalize by working with, effective partners, both the passive investor looking to get involved with the deals that we're doing on a daily basis through Ground Up Fund, as well as builders looking to expand their inventory in these markets, or investors looking to capitalize on what the future growth of land is going to be. I think there's a good amount of areas where I'm doing business now where the more business that I do, and the more money that I can make, the longer that I will actually want to hold some land for. Where there's certain areas that are experiencing extreme growth where, yeah, you might be able to make double your money on a land deal now, but it could be, a 10x deal if you hold it for a few years. So I think there's additional opportunity on the land banking side thing. For 2025, Dan, we're continuing to grow this community that we've created through the Big Picture Blueprint. Dan and I also have a community on School where we've put together a ton of information and resources for people that is currently right now all for free for you guys to join. So feel free to check us out on School if you want to learn more how to operate a business like this. And I think that we're going to continue to grow in that space by helping a lot more people learn how to run these businesses, because as we grow our fund and grow within our own businesses and make more money and raise more investor capital, we're going to need to have the ability to deploy that capital into really strong operators deals. And we want to make sure that those of you guys that are in the land business actually know how to run an effective and profitable land business. And we do very real, examples from our own businesses that has given us the foundation to create SOPs for an effective business for someone else to operate. And we do weekly calls in there, for now, and it's all free. So feel free to check us out on there. But Dan, anything else, 2025, you want to kind of talk about the outlook, what you're focused on, or anything else?
No, more than anything, it's just more of the same. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think the biggest thing that differentiates people who get where they want to go is the ability to sit and focus on one thing over the long term. And the land business is a great example of that. I've seen so many people. I feel like an old man in the business in the sense that I've already seen so many people come and go, about to hit 7 years. And it's changed my life. And so it's focusing on that, continually, and taking what's worked and just doing more of what's worked at a more of a volume is really all I'm trying to do.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I think that you having built your business from it's almost like a reverse vertical integration of learning it from new construction, getting involved in land, still doing new construction, owning rentals, and it's definitely what we've got on the horizon for us. And doing more great deals makes it much more possible. So, everyone, thank you if you made it all the way to the end of an hour of Dan and I's very honest and transparent of review of 2024 and what we're looking at getting going in 2025. And we're very optimistic doing it. But thank you guys for listening. This is Mason McDonald and Dan Haberkas with the Big Picture Blueprint, signing off.